You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and it's that time again, Tuesday, which means power rankings as we jump through our tier list from worst to first, going through all 5 of the categories we have lined up. Obviously, what we have on the screen right now is last week's rankings. I actually changed the titling up at the top to make it a little less confusing. Previous week's rankings. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to flip the screen over, start anew as we work our way from worst to first. I invite you on the comment section down below. Let me hear from you all. I put out a poll this week, and I actually did this last week with the Cowboys as well, but I kind of want to hear from you all. If you didn't see it earlier, what was it? When did I put it up? Sunday? Was it Monday? Was it yesterday? I can't remember when I put it up, but the Jets falling now to 3-8 in just kind of a disastrous place. I asked the question, who do you blame? Woody Johnson, Joe Douglas, or Aaron Rodgers for their troubles? Comment down below. I'm very curious to see what you all think, whether you're a Jets fan or not. Who do you point the finger at for the epic collapse of the Jets? And if you want to go back to the Cowboys last week, I basically laid it out for everybody. I laid it out for Dak Prescott. I laid it out for Jerry Jones. I laid it out for Mike McCarthy. So everyone is opened to point the fingers at those guys as well for the Dallas Cowboys as they fell in last night's Monday night contest. But starting from the bottom, working our way up to the top at number 32, we have ourselves the Jacksonville Jaguars, still sitting at the bottom of the barrel here at 2-9, Giants at 31, Browns in front of them at 30, the Raiders at 29, Patriots at 28, and the Tennessee Titans rounding out the group, the number 1 overall category at number 27. So the Jaguars, 52-6 loss. There's not a lot you can really say about that. I like to try to spin some things if I can that might be good or worth pulling from, but there's not a whole lot you can pull out positively from a 52-6 loss. My prediction for that game was a 40-17 win for the Lions, and I didn't even know if I really believed that was going to be the final score, not to discredit the Lions, but just more so those types of blowouts don't always happen that often. And sure enough, I didn't give the Lions enough credit, and I gave the Jaguars too much. I could not believe that it wound up being even further apart than that. I guess my one question right now is just, how is Doug Peterson still employed, and how is he going to be the one that's going to be making changes going forward when the change, and it's not all him per se, but one of the changes that needs to be made is coaching as a whole. The Giants at 31, obviously not participating this week, but some big news as Tommy DeVito is going to be taking over at the quarterback spot as Daniel Jones has not only been benched, but made the number 3 inactive emergency quarterback for the Giants. So not only did he get the boot from off the field to the bench, he is not even going to be playing unless absolutely necessary. Drew Lock's going to be playing the backup for him. Very curious to see how that plays itself out for the remainder of the season. Browns at 2-8. Very incredible thing to see where a quarterback throws for nearly 400 yards passing and a couple of touchdowns, and they ultimately still lose. But when you start looking back at the game and just the way things played out, I mean, he had a turnover on downs and 2 missed field goals in the first half. There was not a lot really going Cleveland's way offensively, aside from Jameis Winston just racking up a ton of yards. Jerry Jeudy had a bit of a flashback to his Bama days with the way he was playing in this game here, but the defense basically let Taysom Hill, and this was kind of like a flashback type of game here because Taysom Hill, pretending like it was 2020 all over again, just absolutely demolishing their defense to the tune of 3 scores and well over 100 yards in the night, or the afternoon, I guess I should say. But overall, just a tough performance for the Browns and a team that is on the fast track to picking somewhere most likely in the top 5, if you would ask me. Raiders at 2-8. Gardner Minshew, if he has 43 pass attempts when the final whistle blows, you know things are not necessarily going right for your offense. You are not winning football games throwing 43 passes with Gardner Minshew as your quarterback. Your team amounted to just 16 runs on the day, 20 of your total yardage on the ground coming from Jacoby Myers, which was the leading rusher for your team on the day. The offense over there is going through what it's going through in Las Vegas, and I genuinely feel for the Raiders. Defensive side of things, they had their hands full, obviously, as Miami was just kind of scoring at will throughout the entirety of the game. The only possession not scoring on being the one before the end of the first half, but this is another team that is on the fast track to what's I'm expecting going to be a lot of changes in the very near future, and will be a much different looking Raiders team going into the 2025 season. Patriots sitting at 3-8. Drake May continues to shine. And honestly, the conversation is getting a little bit loud right now, at least in New England where I work specifically. But there's a lot of conversation right now about Drake May and his growth and just what this team should do with him going forward. There's conversation regarding the coaching staff and they're the right fit for them to develop Drake May and turn him into the franchise guy everyone seems to be hoping he's going to be. But also the conversation of if Drake May might not necessarily be the third best quarterback in this draft class. Right now, as it stands, there's a lot of conversation around Jaden Daniels. I think there is maybe a little bit of conversation and buzz coming from Drake May. I don't really know if it's outside of the New England area, though, to be completely honest with you. But the one conversation that I think needs to start being had about franchise quarterbacks is Bo Nix, and we'll get to that in a second. But I will say that Drake May is making a case. I feel like he's looking better and better each and every single week. Sean McVay had a lot of praise to heap on him in his post-game press conference, calling him a stud. And it says a lot about a guy when, you'll pump people up prior to the game, and because you don't want to give bulletin board material, but post-game, when it's all said and done, and you don't really have to say anything nice about him. The fact that he went out his way to really pump up Drake May, it goes to show you that it's not just Patriots fans or maybe Patriots coaching staff or whoever it may be within the Patriots organization trying to put the information out that feels like Drake May could potentially be a guy for them. Defense was a bit of a nightmare in that game against the Rams, though. I will say that the Patriots went in with basically a different scheme as far as how they were going to handle defense against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and I get it. You don't necessarily have the manpower to line up man-to-man against those two guys, but my goodness, that they torch you when you were dropping back in zone. So it is what it is. Patriots are a team that are going to be picking somewhere, most likely, if not in the top 5, in like the top 7 or 8. So makes sense I have them where they are, and I feel pretty good about it. Titans rounding out the group at number 27, though. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, 5 touchdowns on the season now, including that massive 98-yard score against Minnesota this past weekend here. Running for the offense was basically impossible, and that was not necessarily to be expected, because going into that game, when I did preview the matchup, I was talking about how I was interested in seeing whether or not Tennessee was going to be able to find any success running the football against one of the league's best run defenses, because that defensive front over there in Minnesota has been extremely impressive this year. So to see them kind of struggle the way they did, not necessarily super surprising, a little bit unfortunate there. Will Levis had a couple of moments here or there. Obviously that 98-yard strike was a nice play to Westbrook-Ikhine, but overall, this team is what it is right now, with a rookie head coach still working through his first season. Will Levis having his moments here or there maybe, but not necessarily someone I'm banking on leading a franchise for the next, handful of years, or at least the foreseeable future. But the defense, though, has been pretty good for what it's worth here. And this is something I talked about in my preview for this game, and I'll reiterate it again because I'm not afraid to call myself out on things. I kind of, I leaned on the side of believing that maybe the Titans defense was a little bit suspect, but they seem to be playing a little bit better than the sum of their parts, and it's kind of impressive what they're doing, because, you held Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, all things considered, with your offense really not moving too consistently as well. It's just 142 yards and a touchdown between those two. Not a bad stat line, just considering obviously who Justin Jefferson is, and 142 yards and a touchdown is like a normal night for Jefferson alone. So credit there for at least that effort on their part. Moving into struggle bus, man oh man. At number 26, we are looking at the New York Jets, sitting at 3-8 now. Like I mentioned, the poll results are in, and a lot of people seem to be blaming Aaron Rodgers for the current state of the Jets franchise, and we'll touch on that more in a second. Saints sitting at 25, the Panthers are sitting at 24, Cowboys at 23, Bears at 22, and the Bengals rejoining the struggle bus at number 21. Now the Jets, like I said, Poll results are in. A lot of people blaming Aaron Rodgers, but a lot of people blaming Woody Johnson. It seems like Joe Douglas is the guy that is catching a very, very small amount of the flack for what's going on right now. But I really think that it's a combination of all three in some capacity. Woody Johnson, obviously being the owner, he is allowing everything that is currently going on. He's the one that signs every single check at the end of the day, so the buck does stop with him. Obviously, if you have your opinions about Johnson as an owner, and you believe that maybe this organization would be far better off if he was no longer the owner, I get where you're coming from there. I do think Joe Douglas deserves a decent portion of the blame as well. You've constructed a roster that is really good, don't get me wrong, but falling into the trap of bringing in Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams to appease Aaron Rodgers on top of that, and the way this is currently going right now, it feels almost like there is a possibility that Rodgers is just going through the motions and maybe just collecting a paycheck at this point here. It sounds like he wants to be back next year. The Jets at least asked him about that, and he did himself confirm that he would like to be back next year. I am very curious to see what happens, and I would honestly have a lot of respect for Joe Douglas if he could find a way to get Woody Johnson to sign off on just moving on from Rodgers and Adams altogether and just, leaving this failed experiment behind them and maybe moving forward. But I'm starting to question what exactly is going to happen here, because that situation is indeed quite the mess. And then, of course, if you want to blame Aaron Rodgers for kind of taking control of this team and the Robert Saleh firing and just the current state of the organization and where it is, I get where you're coming from with that. You could point the fingers in a lot of different directions here, but right now, one thing I think everyone can agree on: the Jets will Jets. And that rings true, and as true as ever in 2024. Saints sitting at 25, 4-7, coming off honestly, a pretty dominant win, I would say, against the Cleveland Browns. I thought that game would be a little bit tighter, and I'm pretty sure that game was basically like a pick-em going into it, just with how tight it was between the two teams. But ultimately, it was really Taysom Hill, who just coming out and, again, playing like it was 2020 all over again, finishing the day with 7 carries, nearly 140 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging 20 yards per attempt every single time he put the football in his hands. He was fantastic for this team here. Derek Carr played a pretty good game himself as well. Don't want to take all the credit for Taysom, but Taysom did an excellent job, I will say. Defense was disruptive when it needed to the most. And I mean, aside from like the interception that Taysom Hill threw, a fumble from Derek Carr, this was a pretty damn complete game from New Orleans from start to finish. They were really creative with what they were doing offensively. The defense did a really good job not breaking a ton. And ultimately, you come away with a pretty I don't know why I want to keep saying confident. You come away with a pretty solid victory, and one that puts you in a spot that maybe everything isn't lost at the end of this season with 4 wins now and maybe finding a little bit of rhythm. However, that loss is still just ringing extremely loudly, at least in my head, against the Panthers not too long ago. So there is that still hanging over them, but it was a good win nonetheless for New Orleans. Panthers sitting at 24 obviously did not participate. This is a pretty good bye week for the Panthers, as they did move up despite not playing this week just because teams were being thrusted below them. So hats off to the Panthers. Successful bye week. We always celebrate those whenever teams climb, having not done anything besides maybe taking a vacation for the week. Cowboys sitting at number 3 as they tumble back a little bit more here. I mean, just a short list of mistakes and things that we saw in this game here. We saw a fake punt failed. We saw a missed 40-yard field goal. We saw a 64, and this isn't really a failure, but just a microcosm of like what this season has been for the Dallas Cowboys. A 64-yard field goal that was made, but then taken away due to a defensive penalty, so they opted to try to maybe drive down the field and score because of that defensive penalty, and then you come away with no points. So basically a 64-yard field goal wiped away because of a defensive penalty, and it wasn't your fault. Then you have yourself the strip sack fumble. Cooper Rush had at least 3, maybe even 4 passes that were borderline interceptions, and he's lucky that the secondary in Houston just had butterfingers during this matchup here. My goodness. And then to top it all off, the icing on the cake, you had a piece of the roof falling from the ceiling just before the game is, maybe an hour or two or so before the game was set to kick off. Everything is falling apart in Dallas right now, even the stadium. The Bears sitting at number 22, heartbreak, and Bears fans, I really feel for you because I have a coworker, very big Bears fan, and this is my first time really being around somebody who is like a die-hard Bears fan and seeing what was at the start of the season hope, and in the last 3 weeks it getting just absolutely ripped out of his soul. And it's a little bit upsetting to watch. It's quite a sight. And Bears fans, I feel for you because that blocked field goal, my God, does that have to be soul crushing? And I'm actually pretty curious to see, because the Bears are going to be submitting that play to the league to have a review because they believe that it was a penalty the way that their long snapper was, what is the word I'm thinking of here? The way that the Packers played the long snapper in that play is what I'm trying to say here. Ultimately, they thought it should have been a penalty, but it was not called. So that is something that we'll see what happens there. I'm actually curious to see what comes of that. But I mean, Caleb Williams, pretty solid day on his end too. 231 yards passing, he had 70 yards rushing, so he finished the day with over 300 yards of scrimmage total on the day. This was a game that, a win here, even if it doesn't catapult you like back into the playoff contention area, at least it puts you in a spot where you can win games like this against your division rivals. And a lot of people have been having that, the same thing of, the Bears are about to run through the gauntlet of the NFC North now coming up here with all their matchups in the NFC North coming up late in the season. And this is a game where you could have kind of came in, you could have knocked off an opponent, right, that is vying for a legit playoff spot. And right now it's the Lions' division to lose, don't get me wrong, but are vying at least for a potential shot at maybe stealing away the North if everything breaks their way. But ultimately, you come up short in just one of the most heartbreaking fashions possible. Bengals at 21 here, hard to read. Bengals at 21, sitting on 4-7, and man, oh man, this is one that's just... Why doesn't Cincy want to win? That's what I want to know. That is my takeaway from this game altogether. And just some of the other games that we've seen from the Bengals this season here. It was an incredible comeback attempt in that second half where this team looked dead in the water during that first half of play, but ultimately cannot get the job done. Joe Burrow had some really awesome throws in that comeback attempt, and it's just... The defense was hunkering down in the second half, really shutting things down, basically lights out for a large majority of the second half, but you get two chances to close it out late in the game. You can't get it done. The defense finally holding on, just snaps and breaks as J.K. Dobbins rushes in for that final score with about 13 seconds or so left on the clock. Joe Burrow is having way too good of a season statistically for this team to be where they are, and something needs to be done on the defensive end because he's been putting up points for this team quite a bit this year, and it sucks to see someone playing so well at one of the most important positions in all of sports, and his team still finding ways to lose those football games. Moving into the Jeff Fisher category, though, everyone's favorite category. Those teams hovering around 500 or so, give or take a game or two just outside the playoffs, looking in. Sitting at number 20, we're looking at the Indianapolis Colts at 5-6, the Rams at 19, the Dolphins at 18. At 17, we have the Buccaneers. At 16, we have the 49ers. And at number 15, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Colts. I will give Anthony Richardson some major credit here because I have been someone who has been pounding the table about how this might not be working out and it's probably not going to end well. There is still a piece of me that still believes that fairly strongly, but 304 yards, 3 total touchdowns. I've got to give him some credit. I did not expect that performance in a game where you're really not doing much on the ground. Jonathan Taylor didn't have a ton going as well. This was the type of game you want to see from your franchise quarterback that you picked at number 4 in the draft last year. So you got it from him. Whether you want to say, albeit against the Jets, it's an NFL game. You can only play the team that you are scheduled to play that week, and he took his opportunity and quite literally ran with it. So I will give him credit where it is due. That was a fantastic performance on his part. Defense looked pretty good as well in some spots. They still really struggle to stop the run here, but the people I really wanted to highlight here, Kwity Paye and Leatu Atu, the two defensive ends here, racking up 3 sacks and 4 tackles for loss combined. The defensive line continues to be the most important piece to this defense. When they're humming and they're getting going after the quarterback and they're disrupting and stuffing the run up in the middle there, the defense can at least somewhat hold, but it takes quite the effort from that defensive front alone for the Colts to find success defensively. So at 5-6, right at the bottom of Jeff Fisher, I like them there at number 20. Rams at 19 at 5-5. I would have liked a more decisive win from the Rams here. Matthew Stafford absolutely torched the New England Patriots here. And what the Rams brought to the table offensively had the Patriots so worried that a team that loves to run man coverage pretty much week in and week out and just sticks Christian Gonzalez on the best wide receiver, it couldn't devise a game plan that was good enough to maybe still have Gonzalez go after the guy that you would deem the most important piece to the offense, which seemed like Puka Nacua this week. And they just kind of sat back in zone and allowed Matthew Stafford and the Rams to completely dice them up, especially when they were blitzing. The graphic that came up prior to Matthew Stafford hitting Cooper Kupp for that super long touchdown pass, literally talking about how good he was against the blitz, and then the Patriots, I think, rushed like 7 guys, and for Cooper Kupp to be able to just snag the ball out of the air, take it to the house like that was one of the, like, those are the types of things that you literally can't write. Like, it's just life has a way of doing things, and that was one of those things. So defense bent a bit, did allow a couple of things, couple of touchdown passes, but held for 3 field goals, had a big block late in the game. The Rams overall, though, 5-5, right in the thick of it within their division, and basically, what is it now? 1 game behind the Cardinals, tied with, of course, the Seahawks and the 49ers right now, as all 3 of those teams are 5-5. Rams are still very much in the thick of it. Dolphins at 18, sitting at 4-6, a lesser record than the 2 teams behind them here, but the way I look at the Dolphins, they were always missing Tua, and Tua is going to help this team disguise some of their deficiencies, and it's going to open things up offensively for them, and I think that this was a prime example of that. You see the way the offense was going, 353 yards, total offense, 4 total touchdowns. You had a 75% conversion rate on 3rd down. This is a Tua-led offense for the Miami Dolphins, and I'm not surprised that this was the end result against the Raiders team that's reeling right now. If this is the case for Miami moving forward, and they continue to beat down on the lesser opponents that they do still have remaining on their schedule, Miami is very much a viable number 6 or number 7 seed if things break their way. So there is a shot. It's going to be tough to get in because it's starting to seem like maybe the bottom of the AFC playoff picture is a bunch of really tough defenses, and that could be what ultimately costs Miami the spot, and they end up finishing at like number 8. But right now, there is an opening for the Dolphins here. So don't sleep on them. I wouldn't count them out just yet. You still only have 6 losses, Miami. The shot is still there. You just got to take it. Buccaneers sitting at number 17 did not play this week, so we can skip over them. No movement for them. They stay steady, unsuccessful bye week, or just a neutral bye week, if you'd ask me. Then at number 16, the 49ers, 5-5. They no longer have a stranglehold on the NFC West, like everyone has seemed to believe going through a vast majority of this season, despite the situation that they've been in record-wise with the injuries they've dealt with and everything. When you look at this game here, some of the positives, 7 of 11 on 3rd down, had no issues converting. Led in time of possession, you were basically on pace to win that game for a large majority of the contest, the way you were playing it out. But ultimately, things like 9 penalties on the day, not being able to finish drives late when you needed to, and of course, I mean, you have no George Kittle on top of that, so there is that as well. That's obviously going to affect the passing game. It's going to affect things in the ground game as well, because George Kittle's a great blocker. Believe me, I get it. But the 49ers at this point, it's not their division anymore. It really isn't. It's very much wide open. The Seahawks played them extremely well, and I think the Seahawks caught them a little bit off guard playing just how physical that they did in that matchup, because it wasn't pretty from Seattle's end either, and thankfully we'll get to talk about them literally in a second here. But one of the big takeaways I did have from this game, though, game results aside, the 49ers paid the wrong wide receiver $30 million a year. Juwan Jennings is a man amongst boys at this current moment in his career the way he is playing. Finishing this game, 10 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. But there were some plays that this dude was making where he was just getting the ball, he was running over people. It's going to be really unfortunate when the 49ers can't keep Juwan Jennings around because they're paying Brandon Ayuk $30 million. Unless the plan ends up being you move on from Debo and you're going to keep Juwan and Ayuk around. But still, the way Jennings is playing, he could command some serious money, and re-signing him could pose an issue for the 49ers. It's going to be a damn shame to watch him go and play somewhere else and catch passes from another really good quarterback and do this elsewhere, all because the wrong guy got paid in San Fran. The Seahawks at number 15, I think you look no further offensively than the key playmakers that this team has for why they came out victorious. You look at Jackson Smith and Jigma, you look at DK Metcalf, you look at the running back Kenneth Walker, making the plays happen when you needed them to make those plays happen is absolutely why you wound up victorious in here. It wasn't a pretty game by any means. This was like a defensive slugfest. Things were happening that you just, preventing both sides from scoring. Geno Smith, interception. He was sacked 4 times under some decent pressure. San Francisco ate up the time of possession with a 13.5-minute lead. Or excuse me, not 13.5-minute lead. They ate up 13.5 minutes in the second half, is what I was trying to say, on just 2 scoring drives. They put Seattle in quite the bind late in that football game. It felt like they grabbed complete control of that game. Then, after those 2 massive drives, your defense worn out the way it is, holding San Fran to just 5 plays and a punt, allowing Seattle to go off and finish the game late in the fourth quarter. I don't know what to make of Seattle right now. They're very much 50-50, and their record being 5-5 suits them perfectly, because this could be the game that catapults them into being maybe a legit playoff spot team, or maybe if they don't win the division from the Cardinals, maybe like a 6 or 7 seed, something along those lines. I think that's very much a possibility for them right now. They just need some things to break their way in the NFC North, because the NFC North feels like it's going to be hogging up a ton of playoff spots. But overall, there's a shot with this team, and that's why I have them sitting just on the outside looking in. I like what Seattle's doing in some games. There are other games that leave my head scratching. Like I go back to like that performance they had against Atlanta, coming over across the country to absolutely smoke the Falcons in their home stadium. And maybe that's just because the Falcons actually suck. I don't know where they stand right now. That's another team we have to talk about in a minute here, but there is definitely a path to success and a path to the playoffs for the Seahawks. I think their best chance is obviously winning the division, but if some things break their way, they could sneak in. Do you just really need things to fall apart for either the Commanders or maybe I guess the Packers or the Vikings in these next few games if you want to be able to sneak your way in? It's just unfortunate that the NFC is so top heavy right now with a bunch of teams, and the NFC North is again hogging up 3 playoff spots as it stands right now. Now, moving into the playoff hopefuls, as a reminder before we get into this, I like to say this every single week just so you all know, and those of you that may miss it, there must be 7 teams from each division, each conference. You must have a division winner as well. And then the remaining teams obviously being those remaining teams from their conferences here. So 14 teams from here on out. At number 14, it's that Atlanta Falcons team we were just talking about. At number 13, Arizona Cardinals. At number 12, the Broncos. 11, the Chargers. Texans at 10. Vikings at 9. Packers at 8. And then the Washington Commanders rounding out the group at number 7. So the Falcons, like I said earlier, not really sure what's going on with this team. I'm so glad I took Denver because something did not feel right going into this game to me, just kind of a gut kind of feeling. They have no pass rush, literally no pass rush, and it's a serious problem. If you can't get after quarterbacks in this pass-happy league, your defense is toast. And Bo Nix, of all people, was the quarterback to really let you know. And we've seen it from some other quarterbacks too, don't get me wrong. But for Bo Nix to come in, have a 300-yard performance and 4 touchdowns against you, that's insanity. Couple that with the fact that the offense was struggling, stuck in the mud, 4 sacks allowed on 3 on Kirk Cousins, 1 on Michael Penix Jr. because we got a Penix appearance, and that was not something I expected at all this year. Denver's defense basically choked the life out of this offense in the first half and then just left them for dead in the second half here. I don't know where this Falcons team goes right now, and this is a team that I very much would love to kick out of the playoff hopefuls, if not for the fact that they are the team right now that leads the NFC South. So that is why they get to claim this spot at 14. But if I could, but I can't because of the way I have this tier list set up, the Falcons would not be in here if it was my choice. But they are the number 14 team in the playoff picture, in my opinion, right now. Cardinals at number 13 did not participate this week. Obviously, the NFC West division leader right now. They are in such a crazy position because this is not, I don't think anyone had the Cardinals at 6-4, leading the division in the NFC West at this point in the season. And I myself personally, and I have called myself out for this. I've had other people in the comments call me out for it. It's fine. By all means, go for it. I have called this one of the more talent-depleted rosters in the NFL more times than I can count this year, and I'm glad that I'm getting a nice, healthy helping of my own words soup every single morning that the Cardinals sit there leading this division. The Broncos sitting at number 12 at 6-5. As I mentioned just a moment ago, talking about the Falcons, Bo Nix is a gamer, an absolute gamer. A more athletic and maybe even more accurate version of Baker Mayfield. And I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan. So to see Bo Nix doing what he's doing, this guy is as legit as they come. He struggles under pressure, which is fine. He's a rookie. He is allowed to struggle. If he can get that part of his game put together over the next, year or so, year and a half, he could be the franchise guy for the Denver Broncos. He is someone that has started out rocky that first month, and then his trajectory has just gone up and up and up and up, and it's awesome to watch. And then the best thing about this all is that he has a legit, and I'm not saying playoff defense, we're talking championship level defense working behind him at that, and that is the best compliment you can give a rookie quarterback in his current situation here. You couple that with the way Sean Payton is opening up this offense for him, scheming it up. He had 10 different guys that he fed the football to, his willingness to dish it out, the way Sean Payton has drawn up this offense for him. And again, that defense, even minus Baron Browning now because they went and traded him away at the trade deadline, continues to just rock and roll and not skip a single beat. 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss in this game. Secondary was lights out. This team is one of those teams where they're well ahead of schedule, even at only 6-5. And it's unfortunate because I'm really excited and want this team to make the playoffs, but I don't know how much further they go than just a playoff appearance. But at the same time, I look at that defense and I think to myself, that is not the defense, especially come January, that you want to be facing at that time of year. So keep an eye on this Denver team. They are something right now. Chargers at number 11, Justin Herbert to Ladd McConkey. Get used to it. That is going to be the future of the Chargers offense. I'm glad that Justin Herbert got the opportunity on Sunday Night Football to kind of remind everybody what he's all about between his scrambles and just some of the absolute lasers that he was throwing. I feel like some people have forgotten just how good Justin Herbert is because of what has been prior to this season, a bit of a mess type of situation where The Brandon Staley era of the Chargers is one of those things that, like, I wish did not happen for the sake of Justin Herbert's career trajectory, because I think we look at him in a far different light at this stage of his career, because right now people just consider him a stat guy, and that's basically it. But he's so much more than that, and I think we got that on full display against the Bengals this past week here. The defense on the other side of the football field, though, a tale of two halves for them. A good defense, don't get me wrong. They've been doing a great job all year. This was their worst game in terms of points allowed against the Bengals here with the 27 they let up. But, I mean, 6 points in the first half to the 21 that they allowed in the second half there. A little bit concerned because it kind of felt like they were throwing the football game away, but ultimately they got the job done. Shout out J.K. Dobbins for finishing it off. You're 7-3 right now with the Chargers and in a really good spot competing in the AFC West. Texans at 10. I don't really have a ton to take away from this game here because they came in and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. You were supposed to dominate the Cowboys, lay them out, leave them on the stretcher, let them get carried away, and you basically did that. Joe Mixon went for 100 yards and 3 scores. You had 5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and 10 total pass breakups, and honestly, what was probably like 3 or 4 dropped interceptions in this game as well. This game could have been so much further apart than it actually was. You come in, you have a team that is down and out right now, missing their star quarterback. It's officially confirmed now as well. Dak Prescott is done for the season. He's going to get that surgery on the hammy. You decimate a team you should have, and Houston, after this win in Jerry World, are officially, in my book, the owners of Texas football. Shout out to the Texans. Vikings at number 9 at 8-2. There are a handful of teams with less wins currently above the Vikings right now, and I'm not going to go away from it. I will say this team will go as far as Justin Jefferson, Brian Flores, and the defense takes this football team. That's where I stand on it. Kevin O'Connell's doing a fantastic job with this offense and is doing and making Sam Darnold look pretty good. But we continue, and it's happening every single week now, where we are getting flashes of what is the Sam Darnold experience. This feels like one and done. And I hate to say that, Vikings fans. It sounds like a hater mentality type of thought. And believe me, I have no ill will against the Vikings. I really do not. But I have such a hard time buying what Sam Darnold's doing. And again, pretty good game from him overall. But it was that opening drive fumble. As soon as I see that happen, first thing that came out of my mouth, oh my God, Sam Darnold experience, here we go. This team will again go as far as Justin Jefferson, Brian Flores, and that fantastic defense that he has put together will take them. I respect the hell out of what Kevin O'Connell's doing. He honestly deserves Coach of the Year, all things considered, with where he's bringing this football team after losing their star quarterback, and obviously Kirk Cousins being allowed to walk in free agency. But it feels like there's a ceiling on this team, unfortunately. And I hate that for Minnesota because Vikings fans, you guys deserve a legit title run. Packers at 7-3. Too close for comfort type of game. Big time block, obviously saving the day here. The big thing that really just that is sitting in the back of my mind as I keep thinking about this game here is just that turnover on downs failure on the second to last drive, where you basically gave Chicago a chance to put the game away there. You can't have those types of things happen. You were literally at like the 1 yard line giving up the football right there. That's where you're supposed to be going and scoring and putting the football game away, not turning it over on the 1, giving Chicago another chance, then getting the ball back to score. And thankfully you don't wind up losing after the blocked field goal. You've got to finish in those types of situations. This game was, again, far too close for comfort. And I'm once again still very curious to see what the league has to say about that field goal block and if that should have been a penalty on the long snapper there. So, listen, you got the job done. Defense showed some weakness in this one here, had a really tough time getting off the field, especially in the second half here. You had a 13-minute differential in time of possession in this one here between you and Chicago. That's got to get cleaned up because that's not championship level defense performance right there and could be something that winds up costing you come January. And then the Commanders rounding out the group at number 7 at 7-4. I believe they are 0-4 now versus teams over 500 to this point. I believe that's what it is. If I'm getting that wrong, feel free to correct me. I honestly, bad on my part because I completely forgot to go double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's 0-4 against teams over 500 right now. This was the sort of team ahead of schedule type of reminder that I think the Commanders kind of needed here. We all need to remember that, yes, at 7-4, this Commanders team has been awesome to watch. It's been very fun to watch, but Jaden Daniels is hurt right now, and I think that's kind of clear with the way his rushing totals have tanked ever since that rib injury. But also, this is a team with a rookie quarterback and a completely reworked defense that was basically ripped from the foundations and rebuilt entirely. This is a team so far ahead of their schedule right now. They were picking in the same place as a team like the New England Patriots were last year. They picked literally one spot ahead of them, and you see where the Patriots are. That's not necessarily where you'd expect to be, but like maybe a couple of wins over that, you would hope. The Commanders are far and away above those expectations and then some. So I'm not super worried about them. I still think the Commanders could give a lot of teams some fits the way they've been playing football, and that defense is one thing that I've been kind of back and forth about this year so far, but I believe could give the right teams and right matchups some problems. So if we can get Jaden Daniels healthy again back in Washington, I would feel a lot better about this Commanders team right now, but I'm starting to think that rib injury might cost them what was a really exciting season and ultimately is hindering what the offense could be right now because he has to protect himself out of necessity more than anything else. So we'll see where they go here. But again, they're a team that I would have loved to have like in the Super Bowl contenders a handful of weeks ago, but they have lacked that big time signature win all season long, and they keep coming up short when the opportunity presents itself. And this game against the Eagles was kind of another microcosm of the season to this point here. Good team that's beating all the bad teams that they need to be beating here, and even some of the middle of the pack teams as well. But they can't get the win against those teams that you need to have those wins against to consider yourself a legit contender. And then to wrap it up, and this is going to be one of the more fun Super Bowl contender categories we have put together because so much changing after this past weekend slate of games. We start at number 6. Embrace yourselves, everybody. Number 6, Ravens sitting at 7-4. Whoa. Ravens at number 6, sitting at 7-4. The Steelers at number 5 at 8-2. Eagles at 8-2, sitting at number 4. Chiefs at number 3. Dropping a couple of spots, finally being taken down off their pedestal at 9-1. The Bills sit at number 2 with their big win at 9-2 themselves, and the Lions claiming the throne at 9-1, the number 1 team in the NFL right now. We look at the Ravens, the Justin Tucker yips going 1 for 3 on field goals are unfortunately like the big difference. You can look at, maybe we should have finished a drive here or finished a drive there rather than having to settle for field goal attempts. Again, you had 3 shots at field goals. You only got one of them, and the argument is there. Obviously, the offense should have been able to get it in, but this is a grinder of a game. AFC North football at its absolute finest. 2 defenses just throwing bombs and haymakers at the opposing offenses here. You still managed to rack up over 100 yards rushing. Secondary actually held up after what's been a really ugly kind of mess that we've seen from the Ravens against the pass over the last month or so, it feels now, only allowing 202 yards and an interception. So this was unfortunately a game that almost feels like you gave away more than anything else. I don't want to take anything away from the Steelers, but in a game where situationally the Ravens are typically really good, where you can count on Justin Tucker to finish those drives for you, that you're not getting into the end zone. He's missing field goals. You have missed opportunities just left on the table type of deal. Unfortunate for the Ravens, but quite simply just did not play as the better team, in my opinion, and that's why you are where you are. Steelers at number 5 at 8-2. Not a lot of football teams can win football games with 6 field goals, but the Steelers seem to find ways to do so. With a defense as good as the one that they have, It's worked. This is not the first time we've seen the Steelers win a game just kicking field goals for the victory here. It's actually the second time this season we've seen them do something like that. So if anyone can do it, I guess it's the Steelers here. George Pickens continues to be a living highlight reel for the Steelers as well. You would have liked to see a little bit more from this passing attack, though, as I just kind of talked about with the Ravens here. I would have thought that maybe Russell Wilson would have a pretty strong game in this, but this was his first. This was like his baptism by fire type of deal with the AFC North. You're going up against this is like the rivalry, at least for me personally. This is the rivalry in the AFC North, Ravens Steelers. This was his first foray into that matchup there, so it was fun to see it play out the way it did. Again, I would have liked to see a little bit more. I have so much respect for Pittsburgh with the way they run the football, because even if they're not getting a ton of yards per carry, which in this one I think they were only averaging I think it was 3.6. I forgot to write it down, but it was something below 4. And they still were just like, no, we're going to run the ball nearly 35 times, and we're going to still grind out 100 yards just because that's how tough we are of a football team. Obviously, again, the defense, I tip my cap to what they did over there. TJ Watt, the game breaker that he is, making an impact in this one. But the Steelers and Ravens, man, I can't wait to see the next football game between these two teams, because that is AFC North football. And when those two teams clash, and I'm glad that the two teams are kind of where they are right now, where the Steelers have found something really good in Russell Wilson, where the matchup means something once again. Because when this game means something between these two teams, it delivers you some of the best football. Even if it's not necessarily the prettiest and it might not be everyone's cup of tea, those are the types of games that I live for, where it is just an absolute grind between the two teams and somebody comes out victorious, and it's an absolute war getting to that end result. The Eagles are sitting at number 4 right now. Again, 8-2 record. Saquon Barkley totaling for nearly 200 total yards with a couple of touchdowns. I mean, the difference that he has made for this Philadelphia Eagles team cannot be understated. For all the praise that the Ravens get for bringing in Derrick Henry, the Eagles deserve just that same amount for bringing in Saquon Barkley. I sit here and I go, man, how could the Giants have let a guy like him walk? But then you have to sit back and realize, like, he's not producing these types of numbers on the New York Giants in the current state that they're in right now. He is obviously benefiting from being on the most talented roster he's ever been on, and it's awesome to watch. This guy has brought this offense to another level, him alone, which is unbelievable to say the least. You couple that with the fact that the defense has, at this point, it seemed like it's buried its demons from last year, and even some of the early season issues. You have guys like Quinion Mitchell, who are well in the conversation for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Cooper DeJean's also been fantastic as well over the last month or so. And then the defensive front with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, all those guys just leading the charge, being incredible plugs in the middle of that defense. And then you have guys like Zach Bond, who are basically playing for free, and he's just an absolute menace over in the middle of the defense. This Eagles team, at one point, 6 weeks ago, sitting at 2-2, calls for Sirianni's job. The noise was loud, and now you have the Eagles, one of the two Pennsylvania teams, battling it out at 8-2 with the other one. You cannot ask for better football going on in the state of Pennsylvania right now, with Pittsburgh at 5 and the Eagles at 4. Pennsylvania football in the NFL has not been this good in quite some time collectively. The Chiefs sitting at number 3. This loss was always inevitable. The likelihood that a team's going undefeated is obviously not there, and the Chiefs have been dethroned in some tough fashion. Xavier Worthy has got to stop stepping out of bounds, catching these deep balls. This is now at least the second time I can think of off the top of my head where he lets a big play go that could have been basically 6 if he kept his foot in bounds and was, working a better trajectory towards the ball. So that needs to be adjusted. Hopefully the deep passing game can kind of sort itself out here. I'm not super worried about the Chiefs. I still think that they are one of the best football teams in the NFL, and I know that there are the people who think it's them and the refs versus everyone else. But all that stuff aside, They still have an extremely talented roster. I still believe in Patrick Mahomes to get it done when it matters the most. It's always about the end of the season for the Chiefs anyways. They have dropped what feels like every single regular season game that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen have met to Buffalo. So it's one of those things where it's like, it is what it is. They were bound to take this loss eventually. This was, at least in terms of points allowed, the worst game the defense has had this year as well, and it took the league's third best team in points per game scored to be able to do that to them. So it is what it is. Isaiah Pacheco's return, though, is something to keep an eye on. With him and Kareem Hunt in the backfield, that is going to be a game changer. So just keep an eye on that, because it sounds like Pacheco could be back as soon as next week, if not the next. And that is where I think we see this offense completely round into form and start to being a little bit more of a consistent group here. I think we were kind of robbed of what this Chiefs offense could have been when Pacheco went down. And don't get me wrong, Kareem Hunt's been great in his absence, but I'm ready to see Pacheco and Hunt in that backfield, plus Travis Kelce, plus Xavier Worthy, plus now DeAndre Hopkins. There's a lot to be excited about in Kansas City, even coming off of a loss. Bills at number 2, sitting at 9-2, slaying the 15-game winning streak that the Chiefs had going on here. I didn't realize that their winning streak went that far back into last year. Christmas of last year was the last time they lost a football game. Impressive stuff. Josh Allen has claimed the MVP title as his, in my eyes, for at least this current moment here, and he did it with that 4th and 2 scramble for 6. Like, holy hell, when you need it most and you're in that situation. I remember in that moment, it's 3rd down, they don't get it, it's 4th and 2. I'm at work, watching the game on the screen, turn to my coworker, and I go, if this is 31 other football teams, you're probably just kicking the field goal and hoping for the best. But you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs. You cannot kick the field goal here. You absolutely have to go for it. And I'm just hoping for a first down. And to see Josh Allen break that run and score, that was MVP level play right there. Josh Allen, football in his hands, making it happen. 4-6 to put the nail in the coffin for the Buffalo Bills. This is the type of win you need. Yes, the Bills have gotten over the Chiefs a lot in the regular season, but this was a big game where it puts you in position now, not only at 9-2, but same amount of wins as the Chiefs, where come season end, if you can keep pace with them the way they are right now, again, first loss of the Chiefs season, you have a shot at the number 1 seed in the AFC. And that means everyone is coming to your house to play, and that will benefit Buffalo. So big win for them in a must-have type of situation. Tip my cap to Buffalo. And then, of course, Lions fans at number 1. Here you go. Your team has earned it. You as a fan have earned it for yelling at me in the comment section for weeks now that it should be the Lions. I see you. I hear you. It's never been about disrespect. It's simply just the respect I've had for Kansas City. Detroit, though, has rightfully earned this spot now. Their only loss in just a weird game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers so many weeks ago. Detroit has scored over 40 points now in 4 games this season, twice crossing the 50-point margin with 52. Dan Campbell, quite simply, does not give an F who you are. They will stomp on your neck and continue to do so until that final whistle blows, and I kind of respect it. It's one of those things where we're not going to take our foot off the gas. You make us stop. And right now, teams are having an extremely hard time to do so. Obviously, Jared Goff is playing lights out. The defense has been awesome this season. They've really put it together, and even in the games where maybe they're letting a little bit get behind them, they come up in the biggest moments. So they're clutch when they need to be. And then you, of course, and I have to shout these guys out because, again, I'm more of an old school football guy where like the passing and all that stuff is fun, don't get me wrong. But watching a team pound the rock and just completely decimate an opponent at the line of scrimmage the way that the Lions do with their running back combo as well with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the most fun things to watch every single week. Nobody runs harder than that duo, and it is one of the most fun things to watch, and I look forward to checking out the games and the highlights of what they're doing each and every single week, the tape getting to watch back as well. The Lions are at the top. It is their Super Bowl to lose right now. This is the year. If the Lions were to do it, this has got to be the year. So Lions fans, I hope your team doesn't let you down, and I hope they can prove me right for putting them at the number 1 spot here. Those are my rankings. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions, what am I getting right? What am I getting wrong? As always, if you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.